Hello, Garland Nixon here. I got my U.S. Disinformation Governance Board T-shirt on, official, and we've got information. We're going to update on the state of the Ukraine conflict, and we got a bit of a breakdown on the $40 billion finance scam, money laundering. Let's talk. Hello, hello, Garland Nixon here. All righty, we're going to talk about. I think I've got some. Yeah. People are saying much better. I went hard line. I got to stay hard line from that one. I have the option to do it, so I got to do it. All right. And actually, what happened was I needed a dongle for my Mac. It's one of the newer Macs, and the only thing they've got is the USB-C option. So I had to get a little dongle to add on so that I could go hardline. So okay, let's roll. I'm going to talk about dongles and hardlines right now. We got bigger fish to fry. We're going to start with Ukraine. Where we are now. I had been thinking to myself a while now that just a phrase came to mind: the 90-day war. Right, thinking 90 days out we're going to know where this thing is, right? What we've been hearing in the mainstream media pretty much is, you've been hearing something the whole time, and that for a while. And this has been the game of the mainstream media. There's nothing that comes from the mainstream media that I believe. So pretty much the narrative was this: the Russians are losing. The valiant and mighty Ukrainians are holding up against the powerful Russian army, which we also know that it's probably less than 1/4 of the Russian army, and probably like less than 5 or 10% of the Russian Air Force is being used here, right? A very, very small portion of the Russian military is being used. But it's so much so that I know people that believe it. I know like lots of people that are like, yeah, the Russians never knew how hard a time they're getting. I've had people who I know who are knowledgeable people who are PhDs, well-educated people are like, yeah, if the Ukrainians win, which is possible, if they're able to hold out and maybe win this thing. And I'm like, dude, there is no scenario in which the Ukrainians come out of this thing anywhere near a victory. I mean, they're getting annihilated. They're getting turned to mulch. Well, I don't know, Garland. You might be wrong on that. But I'm like, I might be wrong on a lot of things, but that ain't one of them. So I've been following this from the beginning and beforehand. So let me fill you in on my thoughts. Before this started, I looked at it and my feeling was this: it's Bambi versus Godzilla from day one. Sure, Ukraine's big, it's the size of Texas. Yes, they got a lot of people in their military in comparison to most, nothing compared not in comparison to the Russian military, but the Russian military used a fraction of this is a military operation. It ain't a war. They used a fraction of their military power, and very little of their air force, right? And one might argue they tiptoed through this war to some extent because they didn't want to smash all the cities and destroy all the infrastructure, and so they avoided that to some extent. So they went through. This was a war conducted with kid gloves, shall we say. This is my appearance. I mean, this is the way I see it. This is my evaluation of the conflict. Others may differ, but this is the way I see it. So from the very beginnings, I'm like, well, there's no scenario in which Ukraine has a chance, any chance at all. So as it went on, the news continually reported these great Ukrainian victories, and the Russians were, they had miscalculated, and they're really getting beaten. And I'm online. I'm on a lot of sources on Telegram, on YouTube, people that I know, people on the ground, people all over the world. And the feedback I'm getting from the people that I trust is it's a lopsided. It's what you would expect: a superpower versus a non-superpower, right? I mean, let's face it, it doesn't even make sense from a logical perspective that Ukraine would get anything other than crushed, right? We're talking about the Russians. We're not talking about some half-assed military. We're talking about the people that 80% of the Nazis' losses, of the Germans' losses, were to the Russian military. We're talking about the Russians who took what 1,800 towns or something that pushed from that the Germans attacked and the Russians counterattacked all the way through Eastern Europe, all the way to Berlin. We're talking about the Russians that the French attacked and the Russians counter ended up in Paris, right? That's what usually happens. If you attack the Russians, you go there, they end up in your capital. So I didn't see any way that on their border, if anything else was going to happen, particularly with the technological advances, where this is a military superpower, right? With the military technological advances. So I guess people were like, yeah, but these guys were trained by NATO. I didn't see that as a big positive. Okay. So let's move forward. So what we got day and night from the mainstream media in the US where I live was, yeah, the Russians are taking it on the chin. Oh, the Ukrainians are just giving them what for, why not, and don't do it again. But the stuff that I'm seeing from people that I know on the ground, people that I trust, military experts all over the world are saying just the opposite. They're saying, yeah, this ain't looking good. The Russians took Mariupol. Let me give you an example. The Russians took Mariupol. I'm watching like a parade in Mariupol on Victory Day. Literally, they're having parades. People are wandering the streets. Dogs are barking. They're handing out the supplies to people, right? And the Russians are saying we now control Mariupol, right? And at that time, the only thing left was the Azov battalion and their guys, which were hidden in the Azov style cement factory. They're underground. They're 9 floors underground, hiding, getting bombed day and night. Right. I'm watching the media here, and the media is like, the last pitched battles are going on in Mariupol. The Russians are still struggling to hopefully win Mariupol, but it's going to be tough. And the Azov battalion might hold out. And I'm watching like Victory Day parades. I'm like, that doesn't make sense. I mean, a parade and there's fighting at the same time. Geez, they're marching down the street, brass bands, kids holding banners. And I'm like, and they're still fighting for Mariupol? Something tells me perhaps I'm being misled by the mainstream media, which is what I expect. So finally, the Nazis in Mariupol, I don't know if they did a Donner Pass thing, if they're eating each other, eating their dead, who knows what the hell. But at some point, whatever they were doing got old. And they're like, we're out. And they came out and they surrendered and they get taken away. And I'm watching the video. They're like holding up. They're like got white flags. They're being searched. They're pulling off their shirts. There's swastika tattoos all over creation. What you'd expect from Nazis, right? And the mainstream media is like, yes, the Azov battalion held out. And now the Ukrainian government has arranged for an evacuation. And I'm like, with white flags? Guys come or walk, they're like got a mop handle with a t-shirt on it for a white flag walking out of this place, and the mainstream media is like, yes sirree, that's an evacuation. And I'm like, well, that's an interesting way to phrase it, but again, perhaps I'm being misled, right? So that's all I get. Evacuations from Azov style. There are pitched battles in Mariupol. At the same time, there's friggin' Victory Day parades going up and down the street. And I'm like, okay. And so now, I think they're starting to realize the Donbass area of Eastern Ukraine, there was a gigantic concentration of, the numbers I've heard is between 60 and 100,000 troops in the Donbass region. That's the region where the Russian-speaking people were. Okay. What my research is telling me is that the Russians are creating cauldrons. For you, if you don't know anything about Russian fighting style and Russian history, what they do is a cauldron is where the Russian military surrounds an area, right? So you're in a cauldron. Then, as like you're cooking in a cauldron, you slowly turn up the heat, right? Whether it's with bombs or whatever, artillery, you make it hotter and hotter in the cauldron until the people, either they're going to surrender and come out of the cauldron, or they're going to get cooked, mainly get blown to pieces by artillery. So you surround them, you flatten them with artillery, and then you walk in and you pick up the pieces. Basically, the soldiers walk in and everything's been flattened by artillery, and there's not a whole lot of resistance, right? So I'm reading online on all the stuff that I'm reading, that the Russians are putting these Donbass, the troops in the Donbass, thousands and thousands of them, they're encircling them, that they're giving up. And then there's pictures of them splayed in grotesque, visions of death in every which way. I'm like, my God, I can't unsee this. I'm on Telegram. And I mean, you're seeing all kinds of pictures of like lines of bodies of Ukrainian soldiers. There's the blue passion. I'm like, yeah, that doesn't look good. It doesn't look like they're winning. Everything I see, I'm like, it doesn't make sense that they're winning logically from the beginning. And I'm seeing pictures of artillery and bodies all over the place. That's probably not a positive thing if you're a Ukrainian soldier. And what I'm seeing is this. What I'm hearing online from the experts, what I'm suspecting based on my research, right? Because what I'm seeing and hearing online from my research matches my expectations. I would expect a military superpower to crush a non-military superpower, and this is what I'm seeing. The only place that I'm getting something different is in the Western media, which is the people who I never trust. So all coming together, I'm like, I kind of think that things are looking kind of bleak for the Ukrainians, right? Okay, so I continue to watch that, and now it appears to me it's not pretty. About a week ago, Lloyd Austin, who was the U.S. And now keep in mind something. This does not align with the argument that Ukraine is an independent country. Lloyd Austin, who is the Secretary of Defense, not for Ukraine, but the US, calls Sergei Shoigu, who is the head of the Russian military, and says, we need a ceasefire. And Shoigu should have first said to him, I'll have to talk to the Ukrainians about that, dude. But the truth is, Shoigu knew the truth, and that is there is no Ukrainians, that this is a United States operation. Now, here's another problem, two things that don't match. I've never heard of an instance where the winning side in a war requested a ceasefire. Hey, we got them where we want. What do you think we should do now that we got them down and running for their lives? I know we'll have a ceasefire so they can get themselves together. No, a ceasefire is always going to be requested by the guy that's getting pounded, or they got some civilians in trouble or something. If you got the enemy on his back foot, the last thing you're going to do is ask for a ceasefire. In all honesty. So sure, he asked Shoigu for a ceasefire, and I think Shoigu, probably, curled on the floor laughing and said, "Nah, that's not happening." So, I'm reading things all over the place now. I'm seeing that the Ukrainians are being encircled, that they are losing all kinds of troops and major, human loss of soldiers, casualties, unbelievable, astronomical numbers of casualties. And quite frankly, this thing's rolling up towards an end because the Russians are just doing what they do. It's a military operation. The U.S. keeps saying, look, they're not meeting their deadlines. I never read any Russian deadlines. I never saw something from Russia that said by May 18th, we want to be here. By May 31st, we want to be here. They just said, ultimately, we're going to smush this place. And we're willing to do we're willing to talk and come up with a diplomatic solution. You already know what we want. If you don't do that, let me be clearer. Very early in the conflict, it was reported that there was a discussion between Vladimir Putin and Emmanuel Macron, and Putin told Macron, "I will get what I want, either through diplomacy or by arms. But Ukraine will be disarmed, it will be denazified, and it will be it will be a neutral state, either diplomatically or by arms." And I kept reading that all of these leaders would call Putin and talk to him, and they would report, well, Putin feels that he's winning. Well, the only people that really didn't feel that he was winning was the mainstream media in the West. He felt like he was winning. I thought, based on my research, I felt like the Russians were winning at bit by bit, but what they were doing was very calculated. Cut off the supply lines. That it wasn't, we're just going to storm in and pound these guys. It was, we're going to cut off their command and control. We're going to cut off their supply lines. We're going to isolate the troop into pockets. We're going to cut them off into cauldrons, and then we're going to crush that area. We're going to cut them off into one area. We're going to crush that area. Then we're going to surround them in another area, and then we're going to crush that. And that bit by bit, that they had a very calculated way of doing things. And knowing what I know about the Russian culture, that actually matches the Russian culture. Extremely cautious, extremely slow to act, slow to move, thoughtful processes, and that's the way they do things. So this matches what I already know about the Russian culture. Okay, so it appears to me now that what we're going to get out of this, I don't see at this point any other way. Very soon, maybe and I'm saying soon within weeks now, and that's soon to me. The Donbass is over. The Russians are going to either have all of the troops in the Donbass, the ones that can will have retreated, the ones that can't will be either annihilated or they will have surrendered. There's not going to be nothing left from a huge contingent of troops. In my opinion, that's going to be the case in Donbass. And the losses are going to be astronomical. And I've said this, you've watched my channel, you know, I've said this at some point, the women and the people who are left behind in these large swaths of Western Ukraine, where the government has come and conscripted all of their husbands and sent them to the front, are going to say, when are our husbands going to come home? And the government's going to say, never. And they're going to say, well, I know some of them are coming home with all of the men in this region. Every man in my town, every man in this region went to the front. When are some of them coming home? And the government's going to have to say, never. None of them are coming home. You're going to have huge swaths of Ukraine where the entire generations of men have been sent to the front to be used for cannon fodder for the United States neocons, for Victoria Nuland and Jake Sullivan and all of these other people will have sent entire generations of Ukrainian males sent to the front. And the Russians said all along, we will negotiate. And Zelensky, puppet that he is, spoke the words of Victoria Nuland in the neocons and said, the only thing we'll accept is complete and total surrender by the Russians. And plus they got to leave Crimea too. Well, it was absurd. It never made any sense, but it didn't have to make sense because it was the neocons. Because what they were doing was throwing Ukrainian bodies to the front as cannon fodder. They didn't give a shit about these Ukrainians. That's what they were. They were cannon fodder. They set them up. They fattened up this a goose, and Christmas came, and now the goose gets cooked. That's Ukraine. That's what Ukraine is to these people. It means nothing. They're vicious monsters. So where we are now is the goose is getting cooked. The generations of Ukrainian men and some women who are on the front, those who aren't wise enough to surrender or don't have the opportunity to surrender, are going to get torn to pieces by tanks and artillery. That's a reality. And at some point, I think at some point when this is over, a lot of people in the world are going to look at this and say, I really believe this. A lot of people in the world are going to look at this and say, what the hell happened here? Because there are going to be huge swaths of Ukrainian people saying, what the hell happened here? You came in and conscripted all the men in our town, all the men in our village, and now you come back and tell me they're all dead? For what? What? For the Donbass? For an area. So Western Ukraine, the Nazis, were fighting to keep an area that was Russian speakers. They were fighting to keep an area that didn't even want to be kept. Here's the secret. Here's a secret that you probably didn't know. One of the things that Ukraine was saying is the Donbass region and Crimea is ours. We want it back. But they didn't really want it back. Why is that? Because the Western Ukrainians would keep the Nazis and the crazies in, right? They'd be in power in their Duma, in their parliament, right? But if they brought all the millions of Russian speakers back in Donbass and all the millions of Russian speakers in Crimea back and let them vote, guess what would happen to their Congress, to their parliament, to their Duma? It would turn into powered by the Western speakers. So they said they wanted to bring these people, the Donbass, Eastern region, and Crimea back into Ukraine, but they didn't want to. They couldn't do it because if those people voted, their parliament would no longer be run by a bunch of Nazis. So even though they said it, they didn't want to do it. So here's the bottom line. They sent all of these people to be turned into mulch for in areas of the country that A, they didn't want, and B, there was no chance they were ever going to get back. They went there exactly as the neocons said. They went there to weaken Russia. They sent Ukrainian bodies to be turned into mulch with no regard for Ukraine. They didn't fight for Ukraine. They didn't fight for the glory of Ukraine. They didn't fight for the valiance or defend their country. They fought to be murdered and massacred as mulch, as a proxy for the United States neocons. How horrible is that? And guess what? And that's what's happening to them. I don't care what the mainstream media tells you, they are lying. These people, and if you can get on the Telegram and watch it, go see a lot of the channels, you'll see people that are being brought in and that are surrendering. They're older than me. I mean, hair white as snow. It's a sad state of affairs. People who are like just people that they grabbed out of their homes and conscripted them. Okay, you're going to the front. Send them straight to the front. Artillery everywhere following it. They sent them to the front to be mangled. And Zelensky's sitting there, you know, he's not in charge. He's just doing what he's told. The U.S. is running it, and in an inept and bungling job of running this war, they're just getting these guys killed. And what they don't care about their lives. So what do they care? They throw a bunch of lives at it. When this is all over, believe me, the stories will be told by Ukraine. The stories will be told of what the United States neocons and the Pentagon and the intelligence did. They will not be happy. They're going to be more pissed at the U.S. than they are at the Russians when the truth gets out about how the United States utilized these people for mulch, just so they could, quote, hurt the Russians. And here's the issue I'm looking at. U.S. is not going to send troops. U.S. ain't sending troops. They are not going to send troops in and die for Ukrainians. If they wanted to do that, they go in and fight themselves. They don't give a shit about these people's lives. In fact, the reason they're using them as cannon fodder is because they want to confront Russia, but they need cannon fodder. They're not going to send they're not going to have Americans coming home in body bags. They're going to use what they consider worthless cannon fodder that's there to be lives that are there to be dispensed. As far as they're concerned, that's all the Ukrainians were ever there for, to have their lives snuffed out on behalf of the U.S. empire. And a lot of these bastards, as fools as they were, goose-stepping Nazis that they were, thought somehow they were going to get in a war with Russia, and the U.S. was going to come in and help them. And you know why they thought that? Because that's what the U.S. told them. Sure, you go fight the Russians, and we'll be right there to help you out, and we'll have a great victory. Slava Ukrainia. Yeah, sure, great. Okay, we're ready to fight the Russians. Where are you, American? Where are you? Yeah, we're way back here in the back. We'll send you some weapons or something. And so now let's get to the 40 billion. Oh, we got to get to the 40 billion. And by the way, don't forget, I am also on Rockfin. So if for some reason, let me put this in here. You can go to rockfin.com. Let me share. I got to share it over here because on any given day, I see it coming. The Disinformation Governance Board is going to toss my ass flat off of YouTube. And when they do, I want to make sure that everybody is on Rockfin following me there. Don't forget, I got a tip jar on Rockfin. If you can do 5, 5, 20, whatever you can do is greatly appreciated. And the same with Super Chats. Certainly appreciated Super Chats. Let's talk about something else. Since we're talking about what's going on, let's talk about what's happening with the money. That's right. It's all about the money. All about the money. I have a family member who is a very high-level finance person, very successful and high-level. My sister, and she always says it's all about the money. Not that she's run corporations and all kinds of big organizations that I'm not going to mention because you've heard of them. And bottom line is, it's all about the money. And that's what she always says, and I agree with her. So $40 billion, right? And I remember, when I had Scott Ritter on, he talked about $40 billion is a lot of money, and you can buy a lot of weapons. So let's look at some of the things it's being for. And one of the discussions we had was it's a scam, right? Let's look at it. Some of the things going on with that $40 billion. You know how they do. Ooh, look. 110 million for, and you start looking down, 110 million for State Department, embassy security, construction and maintenance, 100 million for the State Department for non-proliferation, anti-terrorism, demining, and who knows what that even is. 67 for the Justice Department, 54 million. Listen to this. This is we talked about this when Scott and I talked. One of the things that I brought up is, but what about that 40 billion? Is that really all going to go in weapons? A lot of it's going to be scammed. Look at this. And then here you go. They ain't getting 40 billion, man, my friend. 40 billion ain't going into Ukraine. It was just as I suspected. Look at this. 54 million. That's a lot of money for the Center for Disease Control and Prevention to carry out public health and disease detection related to Ukraine. Oh, that's the monkeypox money right there, my friend. That's the monkeypox money. But think about it when you break it down. 54 million. What the hell? The country is being blown to bits. It's the Russians about to take most of it, and you got to take 54 million for the CDC. What the hell? The CDC is here. What's the CDC doing in Ukraine? They've already lost all of their bio research labs. That $54 million is scam money, my friend. Scam money. Let's keep going. 17 for United States Agency for International Development, USAID. That's Pentagon. That's the CIA. The CIA's money, and they use that for like online bullshit, like the Kiev Independent. Have you heard of that? That's a scam newspaper that's paid for by the intelligence community. That's the kind of stuff that 17 million is for going on. The CDC is getting it right. Let's see, 150 million. Now remember, this was passed as emergency money. Poor dear Ukraine. Oh, we love Ukraine. Those poor people. Did you see the picture? The babies. What about the babies? Let's look at this. 150 million for the Global Agriculture and Food Security Program. What the hell does that have to do with Ukraine? Let's see. Hey, 350 million for the State Department's Migration and Refugee Assistance. 400 international narcotics control and law enforcement to combat human trafficking and collect evidence of war crimes. 400 million. Listen to this. 500 million for the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. 900 million for the Administration for Children and Families for Refugee and Entrant Assistance. $900 million. Do you see the kind of numbers they're talking about here? Let's see. I think there's more. Okay. 20 billion, right? So 20 billion for the Department of Defense. The other 20 billion, God only knows. I guess that's straight into the oligarchs. Hunter Biden's going to sniff it up. Who knows? How about here? And this is, yes, Ukraine. 15 million for troop pay. 414 million for research, development, test, and evaluation related to the Marine Corps. What the hell are you researching and testing for $414 million? Hey, what are you going to do with 400 million? Yeah, research and test. Really, what are you researching and testing? Yeah, sunglasses. Would you believe sunglasses? That money is going to be in Cyprus, in shell accounts, bank accounts. There, man, it's I'm telling you, Hunter Biden is eating off of this dude. This $20 billion Hunter Biden is going to eat, and he shall eat well. Let's continue. 900 million for the Administration for Children and Families of Refugee. That we already did that. 400 million for international narcotics control. Yeah, from what I heard about old Zelensky, that 400 million ought to just about cover his habits. From what I hear about that guy, he's gonna be sniffing up 400 million. So I guess really, if you think about it, between him and Hunter Biden, that 400 million ought to cover him for a month. This money is supposed to only cover until September. So from what I heard, Hunter Biden, Zelensky at 400, keep them straight. Because I think you got your sniffs, you got your sniffies, you got your, ladies of the evening and various other deviant and miscreant behaviors that those guys like to get involved in. That 400 million might not cover them. All right, let's continue. 4 million for the State Department's Office of Inspector General. I don't know if you know, the Office of Inspector General is the guy who makes sure that the people who make sure that everything's on the up and up and the money that didn't get stole. $4 million for the Office of Inspector General. Yeah, that money ain't getting spent. I mean, really. So we're supposed to believe the Inspector General is going to go through this money dollar by dollar to make sure none of it's wrongly spent. You got to be real stupid to believe that. Let's continue. 2 million for salaries and expenses to provide regulatory technical support. The 40 billion would be an additional to the 13.6 billion for a total of 53 billion over a period of 2 months. The largest a foreign aid package to move through Congress in at least 2 decades. Right? I mean, look at this money. 17 billion for, listen to this, US military operations. 1.8 billion for the US military equipment. We're buying stuff for Ukraine. It's a scam. It was always a scam. So when we discuss this from the perspective of how much money, and I mean, when we first got the numbers, it was legitimate. Scott said, well, $40 billion, if they get $40 billion worth of equipment, that could be an issue. They ain't getting $40 worth of equipment. It is a total scam. Ultimately, here's what you got. Think about Afghanistan. They had what? Either somewhere between 1.3 and 2.3 trillion dollars that flowed through the Afghanistan money laundering operation over the course of 20 years. They closed down the money laundering operation. They needed a new money laundering operation. And that is exactly what this is. It's a new money laundering operation. Nothing more, nothing less. That's the game plan. So now let me get towards the closing by saying this. So ultimately, what do we have here? The United States has put itself in a very difficult position because, first of all, they backed Ukraine against Russia. That wasn't bright because Ukraine's going to lose and you lose miserably. I mean, I predicted that from the beginning. It's Bambi versus Godzilla. If Russia had wanted to crush Ukraine, nothing in Ukraine would be higher. Not a stone in Ukraine would be bigger than the size of a 50-cent piece right now had Russia decided to blow it flat. But it didn't. They didn't do that, right? They took their time and they're going to wipe out the military. It's unfortunate, but a lot of men are going to die. Terrible thing, terrible thing to think about. But ultimately, what's happening? The United States has taken the position, and they told their people. See, the American people believe that $40 billion worth of military equipment is going to Ukraine. So the American people have been told that the valiant Ukrainians are standing up to fight the Russians and that the U.S. is sending them $40 billion in technical assistance and anti-ship missiles and everything in the world. And so therefore, and what have we've been told in this scam? Well, we got to give them a little bit more. If we just give them a little bit more, we think it can pull it out. We just give them another 13.6 billion. We got to get this 40 billion, rush it to the Ukrainians so that they can win. And meanwhile, like the Baltic states are cut off from electricity. Finland, their electricity and gas is cut off from Russia because they got a big mouth and they got to listen to the U.S. Poland, they're done, they're fried. The Europe, if you ever watch Dawn of the Dead or one of those dystopian zombie flicks, that's freaking Europe. Europe is economically friggin', it's going just a wasteland. Right. And the U.S. ain't going to be much better, in case you haven't noticed. I think we're up to about $9 million an ounce for diesel fuel right now. I mean, I think you got to really, if you go up to the pumps, you got to give them $100 to smell the vapors of diesel fuel. You can't buy it anymore. Give them $100, smell the vapors, and on you go. That's the best you can get, right, in the U.S. That's how high gas is. In fact, I think they're just selling you a picture of diesel fuel, and that's like $8 per picture. You can't actually get diesel fuel anymore. You got to put it on hold. But $8 will give you at least a picture of diesel fuel. That's where we are. Our economy, the stock market, poof, mushroom cloud. Right. So our economy's done. Europe's economy, we can't even talk about that. It's not even mentionable. Not to mention there's Ukrainian, what do you call it? Refugees running all over the place. You got to see this. Before I go, you got to see this for the Ukrainian refugees. This is the article of all our articles, right? This is the one you got to see. I got to show you this one. You're going to love it. Here we go. Trust me when I tell you this. This is worth it. I don't mean to laugh. It ain't right. I shouldn't laugh. It's not right, okay? It's not right, but here we go. Dad runs off with Ukrainian refugee 10 days after the family takes her in. Meanwhile, this is what's going on in Europe. So think about this. There's a guy, he's his woman, he's got a couple of kids, and they decide we're going to take in some Ukrainian refugees, right? let's be honest, Ukrainian women are fairly attractive. So I think you see where this is going. So the Ukrainian refugee shows up at their door, and there she is. That's the Ukrainian refugee, 22-year-old. I don't know what her name is. It was Sophia something, it was always Sophia or Svetlana or something, right? Okay. Ukrainian refugee shows up at their door. This 22-year-old babe. A man has left the mom of his two children for a Ukrainian refugee who moved into their home 10 days before. He's a security guard. He initially had signed up for the UK government's rehoming scheme last month, but became impatient, so reached out on social media to help. He became Sophia's sponsor, and just over a week after she arrived, has left his partner and children for a new life. He said, "It began with a simple desire from me to do the right thing and put a roof over the head of someone in need." Right? Here's the poor, innocent little woman that was the someone in need, right? That's her. This poor, innocent little thing showed up at his house and she was in need. It came to a head. We'll leave that one alone. Last Saturday, when she really went for Sophie, let's talk about his wife, yelling at her, using some harsh language that left her in tears. She said she didn't feel she could stay under our roof anymore, and something inside me clicked. Tony's new ex-partner Lorna had grown. His ex-partner Lorna had grown fed up at the immediate close bond he gained with Sophia, as the two would go to the gym together and sit for hours talking in a park. Eventually, she ordered their guest to leave, but was stunned when Tony announced he was leaving too. So, what happens? Think about this. This is what's going on. If the people didn't have it bad enough, if they weren't going through enough, now you got some woman, she's got her guy, she's got her kids, they got their family, knock on the door, they're gonna take in a Ukrainian refugee, and old Sophia shows up. That's who shows up. I'm thinking, let me be honest with you about this. Just me. I'm thinking when she showed up that the woman should have been like, you know, I want to do the right thing and all, but she is not coming in my house. If she, I could have told you, excuse me, I could have told you, whatever your name is, lady, that when this lady showed up at your house and hung around, and if you read, there's a number of articles, but if you read one of them, right, it says the woman complained and said, yes, I noticed that she was always wearing lipstick and low cut tops. A 22-year-old blonde bombshell shows up at your house. And you know what she was doing? She was trolling for a schmutz. She was trolling for a sucker. And this woman said, as soon as I saw him, I saw something that clicked. Yeah, something clicked, all right. She is a Ukrainian person, and she's a refugee, and she has nothing. And guess what he's got? Like a green card or something. She shows up, she's like, he smiles, and she's like, oh, this is just too easy. You sucker A, yeah, come over here, leave them. Maybe, and you know what she's going to do? You know what she's going to do? She's going to have a baby. She's going to have a baby because in England, as soon as she has a baby, the baby becomes a citizen and they can't kick out the mother of a baby under the law. And so that's done. She's going to have to get pregnant by this guy. She's going to have a baby, and she ain't got to go worry about going back to some hell-torn, war-torn hellscape, right? So a whole lot of women in Western Europe are going to find old Sophias and Svetlanas and names like that showing up at their door. Hi, I'm a Ukrainian refugee. Maybe I can stay for a while and help you and your husband out with a few things. And she's going to grin, and he's going to turn into mush. And 10 days later, the wife is going to fly into a rage and curse. There we go. Look at this. A Ukrainian refugee who ran off with dad claims dumped two-faced exes to blame. Sofia Cardigan, whatever, fled the Russian invasion in Ukraine, traveling from Lviv to Bradford, West Yorkshire, to Garnet, 28, and her boyfriend of 8 years, Tony. There you go. Ukrainian IT worker hit the headlines in her home country And here in the UK, after Lorna accused her of running off with her man just 10 days after she arrived in their home, she broke down in tears and insisted she was not to blame for the breakup, and claimed that Lorna had driven them off together with constant suspicions. I can't understand why Lorna would be suspicious. You're walking around with lipstick on, low cut stuff, going to the gym with this guy, talking for hours in the park. I mean, that's just what people do. I can't imagine that any man, any guy, think about this, guys or women. If you're a guy and this woman shows up, and you're wandering around with her, going to the gym, talking for hours, can't imagine your wife would ever have a problem with that. What an unruly woman. How unfair is she, said, right? She said her constant suspicions, it just pushed me and Tony closer together. Yeah, that's what it was. She had no interest in this guy. But what happened was when this old lady kept saying, hey, how come you're in the bedroom with this guy all hours of the night? Where are you two going? Back to the gym. Really? Why do you keep coming back with wine on your breath? Oh, yeah, we drinking gym at the wine. Would you wine at the gym? Would you believe? That's what made it. Look, but the mom claims she became wary when she noticed Sophia had no interest in speaking to her and only made an effort with her appearance, including putting on red lipstick and low cut tops when Tony was due home from work. Lorna snapped and turfed Sophia out of her home, but said she was devastated when Tony packed his bags to follow her and left their relationship of 8 years behind. Let me see. Let me do a little investigation. Nope. I'm not surprised that that happened. Whatever your name is, Lorna, I ain't shocked that that happened. A blind man, if she'd come to the door and the wife couldn't see, the wife would have like felt her face and said, oh, hell no, get the hell out of here. What do you know what you think this is? So that's the kind of crap they're going to be dealing with. That's what they brought. There's another article that says there's now a escort service in Scotland that says live out your fantasies with a Ukrainian escort, your wildest sexual war fantasies. So what's going to happen? Okay, you're going to get all of these 22-year-old beautiful women coming. And on top of that, I don't know how much you know about Ukraine. There's just a little bit of organized crime around. So you're going to get organized crime coming. You're going to get a lot of desperate people and poor people. And look, and those are just going to be the citizens in the UK. We haven't even got they're going to be desperate and poor. We haven't even got to the Ukrainian refugees yet. So they're going to come and be even more desperate and more poor. And the pretty ones are going to be looking for a man. They're going to be like, well, I'm coming from a war-torn, God-forsaken hellhole that was already the poorest country in Europe, and now I'm here, and hey, you got a husband, and hey, I look like this. You ain't got a husband anymore. I do. I'm just thinking, there's going to be a bit of that going on. Let's just guess that when Sophia shows up on a whole lot of doors in the UK and Western and what have you, and walks up to the poor old guy, she has a weapon for which these guys have no defense. And she's going to have like that Ukrainian accent, and she's going to look all pitiful and ask the guy, oh, I feel so bad. Can you rub my back? It hurts right here. Game over. Game over, man. Like that dude in Alien. Game over, man. Game over. We're done. They're done. So that's what's going to go down. The people in Western Europe are going to wake up one day and say, look, the Russians won the war, right? Yeah. Our economy is wiped out, and the Russian economy is still chugging along because they got like oil and stuff, and we've driven the prices of oil and gas up so high that we can't afford it, but they're selling it to everybody else in the world, right? Yeah, so they're doing fine, and they're making more money than ever selling gas and oil to India and China and Africa and all of that stuff, correct? Sure, yeah. And we're left eating porridge and gruel on a good day. Yep. And the wives are going to say, and we lost all our husbands to Sophia and Svetlana that came over here and took them, right? Yeah. And what was it the Russians wanted at the beginning of this war? Oh, they just wanted us to get the hell out of Ukraine and just say that Ukraine was going to be a neutral state. That's really all they wanted. They just asked for that. And if we'd have given them that, we wouldn't have to live through all of this. Do you think they're going to be a little bit angry at their leaders? Do you think they're reaching for um, mops and rakes and torches and guillotines? And they are going to be pissed, very, very angry. And the United States is going to have lost a humiliating um, war in Afghanistan to a bunch of freaking guys in 2004 Toyota Tacomas. Then they're going to have come here and fought a proxy war against the Russians and lost. And then they're going to have set off in an economic war of attrition against the Russians, and you won't have to say whether they lost or win, because we'll be in a depression, and the our shelves will be empty, and the Europeans will be living off porridge and gruel on their best days, and half of the women will be, I guess, hovering around by themselves because their wives were all left for Sophia or someone like her. They're screwed, and they're going to look back and say, isn't it possible, perhaps in hindsight, I'm just throwing this out there, that we should have signed that document that the Russians gave us and said, you can have Ukraine. You can have Ukraine. You can have the pretty women that came and took all of our husbands. You can have the Nazis that are goose stepping up and down our streets, spray painting swastikas all over the place, riding our public transportation for free while we got to pay for it. You can have isn't it possible that they're going to look back and say, in hindsight, we should have gave them what the hell they wanted? And the American people are going to say the same. I'm telling you, I think that's where we're heading. I do not believe, I'm at a point now, I don't believe the U.S. military or NATO is going to get involved in this. I felt all along, the longer time went on, the less chance of that. Now, other people thought they were, but I think the longer time goes on, I'm with Gonzalo Lira on this. If they were going to do it, they'd have done it early. And now it's too late. And they will not. What are they going to do? That to save Ukraine? They don't give a shit about Ukraine. They're not doing this to save Ukrainian lives. They don't give a shit about Ukrainian lives. Ukraine is a tool to the neocons, nothing more, a dispensable tool. And the lives and the economy of the Europeans are also a dispensable tool. They don't care. Now, look, if they can get the dumbass Europeans to go throw their lives away in Ukraine, sure. Hey, you know what? The UK, I got an idea. Why don't you send some soldiers? Will we have Americans? We'll be in the background calling in the firing coordinates or something. But UK, France, and Germany, why don't you guys get together a couple 100,000 troops with the Poles and go in Ukraine? Yeah, but the Russians will bomb us with hypersonic missiles and turn us to rubble. Well, okay, fair enough. I'm sure that'll happen. But I mean, hey, think about it. It's all for the cause. This ain't going to turn out well. I think ultimately, I don't think the US and NATO gets involved. I think the longer it goes on and the more they watch, I'll put it like this. They're telling us a bunch of bullshit about the Russians are losing. I also think the longer this goes on and the more they watch the Russians fight, and they know exactly what percentage of their military power the Russians are using, and it ain't a very high percentage. They know that the Russian military is set up to defend its border. Everything they got is set to defend their border. And I think US and NATO knows they don't want to go to war on Russia's border because that will be a meat grinder. And the only thing it can end up is nuclear war. And they don't want to die because they're chickens. They're chickens. None of them getting in a fight, and they don't want a nuclear missiles coming to them because they don't want to die. So ultimately, I think the blunder ends up with the Ukrainians furious at the U.S. empire because the U.S. empire used their people for cannon fodder. I think it ends up with the Europeans furious at the U.S. empire because the U.S. empire used their people for economic cannon fire and fodder. And I think it ends up with the American people furious because they got to pay $5,000 for a small 4-ounce for a shot glass. It's pretty soon, it's not going to be $6 a gallon for diesel. It'll be $6 for a shot glass of diesel. Enough that you can start your vehicle for 5 minutes, but then cut it right back off. You can just start it just to make sure it runs. You want to lubricate the valves, things like that, get the compression up, maybe back it out of a parking space back in. That's all you'll be able to do. You'll be able to afford to back out of a parking space and get back in. Other than that, you're going to be horse and wagon. You know what you're going to do? The people of, especially Europe, you might as well buy your snow shovels now. Europe, everybody in Europe is going to need a snow shovel. You know why? To shovel the horse crap, because you're going to be back to horse and buggy. That's the only way you're going to get around. You're going to be back to horse and wagon. So you better get your snow shovels, not for snow, but to shovel the horse crap out of the street. That's where you're going to end up. That's where we're going. That's my opinion. That's what I think. And ultimately, I'll just simply say this to the poor women of Western Europe: take a look at that picture and remember it. You see that face there? You see that face there, women of Western Europe that are so gallant? You got your blue and yellow frickin' flags. Now read the headlines. Ukrainian refugee who ran off with dad claims dumped two-faced ex is to blame. That's what it is. That's what there you go. That's what you want to remember right there. That's the face that'll be knocking on your door. Hey, I'm here as a Ukraine refugee. Well, what do? Do you need help? Now I just want to steal your husband. And the husband's going to look out and he's going to go, whoa, hey, ooh, I'm out. They're going to say, but she's only been here 10 minutes. He's like, yeah, I made my decision 9 minutes ago. I'm out. He's gone. He's done. You're done. That's the situation there. I ain't saying I agree with it. I'm just saying that's the world we live in, my friends. Don't hate the players, hate the game. How about that? Anything else? Let's see. Does anybody say U.S. empire is losing control over the rest of the world, so they figure they can destroy Europe and make it a U.S. It's already a U.S. protectorate. They just want to destroy Europe. I tried to warn our politicians. Yep, they ain't listening. Bale of hay was $6 a bale. For now, it'll be at least 10 this year. Yeah, I mean, you got to have straw and hay. You got to feed your horses. They got to have someplace to stay in the barn. I mean, we're going to, when somebody says 6 horsepower, yeah, they ain't going to be talking about a lawnmower, my friend. They're going to be talking about actual 6 horses. So actually, I'm thinking about this. Where's the investments? Livestock, horseshoes, furriers. You might want to learn how to shoe horses now. We're going to get back. If you're in Europe, learn how to shoe horses. You'll be able to make a nice living. Blacksmith, the old kind, where they have the bellows and they start the fire with wood and they keep blowing with the bellows to get it hot so they can bend steel, because you ain't going to be able to get gas or oil or anything like that. That all comes from Russia. The United States is cutting that out. And your leaders are cutting that out. So you better, if you got some wood in the area, something you can burn, that's the direction you're going to be moving. What else do we got? Oh, Mr. Ed, there you go. Now, let's see. Some people. I think we got some super chats. Oh, a super sticker from Gordon Osterhage. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. If anybody else can do super chats, I certainly appreciate it. Helps the cause. Oh, I know I had another one somewhere, and it's going to show up. It's going to show. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. Surge says, just today, May 23rd, the CIA issued a press release about adding 2 more. I saw that to its memorial wall, commemorating recently fallen CIA officers. With the events happening in Ukraine, think it's no, it ain't a coincidence. I think they were somewhere in Ukraine and some artillery fell on them and they were hanging around a bunch of Ukrainian soldiers. And right now, that ain't where you want to be. With what's going on in Ukraine, hanging around Ukrainian soldiers ain't where you want to be. The sun will set on the U.S. empire and it will be ugly. I agree. Is there anything else? I think that's it for the super stickers and super chats, unless we got a new one. Did someone else do? Don't forget also, if you want to help out any Ukrainian refugees, there's still some looking for a home, fellas. So, if you're looking for Ukrainian refugees and you want to help them out, there you go, right there. You can look under Ukrainian refugees in town to steal people's husbands, and there you go. That'll work. And I think that's it. Rockfish, Rockfin, no super stickers. Garland's chat is having the opposite effect tonight. I wonder what that is. Take one for the team. Not all heroes wear capes. They will grift as much as possible during the next QE period. That there'll be so much uncertainty with information. See, you got to think about it. I'm glad you mentioned they'll grift as much as possible. Let me tell you what's going on here. Part of what's going on before I go. They know that they've wiped out the economies of the U.S. and the EU, and it may have even been intentional. But what do? You'd steal as much as you can before it goes down. You got to get that last grift in, right? So it's like, hey, what are we going to do? The economy is going to crash. Let's go we can grab 40 billion and divide it amongst ourselves. That's all they're doing. Before it's all gone, they're going to Grab 40 billion and they're going to divide it amongst themselves. That's the game. That's the game. All right. Divide 40 billion amongst yourselves and everybody gets their cut. Like I said, Hunter Biden's got to eat, man. Hunter Biden has got to eat, and eat he shall. What do we got here? Afghanistan got 85 billion in weapons alone. Sell them to the Russians since both countries are sanctioned. Yeah, see what I mean? Look, first of all, from the looks of things, from what I've seen, I don't think the Russians want our weapons because it doesn't seem to me like they're working all that well. So, you know, it looks like we made a whole lot of stuff, but it don't seem to be getting the job done. At any rate, thanks a lot, everybody. Ukraine is mobilizing 1 million men. Russia isn't doing that. Ukraine will win it eventually. Yeah, well, I don't think that's going to happen for some reason. 1 million men. The people that, and here's the other thing. Think about this. 1 million men, is that 1 million soldiers? And their troops are getting wiped out. Do they have 1 million men available that are like 19, 20, 30 years old? If they've got all of these people available, how come they're not out there fighting now? And here's the next thing. Are they just bodies? Are you going to throw human waves at the Russians for them to just heat their machine guns up, shooting the bodies? Do you think the people, you're just going to say to 1 million people, here's what I want you to do, charge those machine guns? If you understand modern combined arms, right? If you understand modern warfare, you've got various kinds of teams. You've got people that have got to be trained in reconnaissance. You've got people that have got to be trained in mortars. You've got people that have got to be trained in artillery, in tanks, in all of this stuff. You just can't throw 1 million bodies out there and give all of them a gun and put all of them, some of them in tanks and some of them in this and some of them in that, and expect them to be effective fighters. And particularly after what happens in the Donbass, the Azov battalion, they're toast. The people in the Donbass are getting wiped out. But what do you think? These people are stupid that they don't know their cannon fodder? You're not going to be able to put together, and where are you going to get the men from? You're not going to be able to put together. Those things are starting to turn into a pipe dream. They don't have the people. They don't have the morale. And very soon, when the women and children in Western Ukraine realize that for wide swaths, their husbands ain't never come home, that they've been ground to pieces by artillery, they ain't going to be happy. And they're not going to send the rest of them. Okay, what do we need to do? Okay, all right. We lost several 100,000 men on the front. Fair enough. Your husbands are never coming. Can we get some more volunteers? More guys? Well, what happened to the last couple 100,000? That's not important now. We need another 200,000 men, 300, 400,000. What do you think, guys? They're grabbing. What do you think? I think that's going to work out. They're throwing them to the front to a meat grinder. It just is not that simple. I don't think it's going to work. I think the United States is looking at a loss here, a very significant loss. And economically, first of all, what's Europe going to do next winter when they're cold and they need Russian fuel? What are they going to do next winter? What's Poland going to do? What's Latvia, Finland? What's all these countries going to do? What's Germany going to do? What are they all going to do next winter when it gets cold and they all need Russian gas? Pretty soon you're going to see rolling blackouts in some of these countries in the Baltics and in Finland. Some of these countries that they're so, we've got to join. And the people are going to be like, we're joining NATO this week, and 2 weeks later, what's going on? It's hot. Turn on my air conditioner. Hey, we got rolling blackouts. What happened? Oh yeah, the Russians cut our electricity off. They're pissed at us. It ain't going to work out well, guys. It ain't going to work out. All right. Thanks a lot. My name's Garland Nixon, at Garland Nixon on Twitter. Make sure you go to Rockfin, ROKFIN, rockfin.com/Garland Nixon. And make sure you go there and you subscribe to my channel. And share this on all your social media platforms. Smash that like button. Smash that like button. Excuse me. 518 people. I should have 518 likes, a minimum of 518 likes. Please, nobody leave without smashing the like button, all right? And I should at least nobody should be watching this today that's not a member. I mean, you know, that's not hasn't subscribed and it hasn't smashed the like button. So please help me out there. Anybody who's watching this on Twitter or any other platform, make sure you go to my Rockfin channel and my YouTube channel and become a member. Share this on all your platforms. Thanks a lot. Peace.